if you've gone crazy in the past. We all have, myself included. So with that introduction, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's just make sure I covered everything, who we're going to include, who we're going to exclude, how we're going to manage everything, and how we're going to trim the tree from past excesses. So let's talk first about who to include in the family tree. The family tree traditionally, and in the minds of some people, is just this: ancestors, right? And ancestors are actually strictly defined as your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, and you keep going, right? And that's a really strict definition of a family tree. It used to be that it was biological only, that when genealogy first kind of became a thing, tracing bloodlines was very important to some people, and things have changed over time. So ancestors, you certainly want to include your ancestors. And of course, as you start thinking about that, you have 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 great-great-grandparents. That number doubles with every generation. And so do my niece and nephews, and so do my sisters-in-law, and so do my aunts and uncles and my cousins. And so kind of the next step in a family tree is to include the descendants of these people. So you've put your ancestors in. Now you want to include their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and you make the decision about how far you want to go with that, right? Parents' children and grandchildren, and I include my grandparents' children and grandchildren, and I've got my great-grandparents' children, right? But then you decide how far you want to go. I am one of those people who actually traces all descendants of any of my ancestors. So I have every one of my grandparents' children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren entered into my database. Same with my great-grandparents. I have every one of their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and now great-great-grandchildren entered into my database. I could go back to, and this is why I have such a large database. Some hear that 68,000 number and look at me like I'm crazy. But I go commonly back to like great-great-great-grandparents. And I think I've used this example before, so if you've heard me tell this story, just bear with me. But I have a 3rd great-grandfather who was born in 1809, who is, yes, feel free to do both. They both will yield different experiences and different information, but both are a part of who you are and a part of your family story. Now, in your family tree, there is a place to note what those relationships are, so that it's clear that those relationships are biological or adopted. If you click on edit on any person in your tree and then you come to this relationship tab, you can actually, the nature of the relationship to reflect biological, adopted, step, foster, guardianship, right? There's lots of different options there. And make sure that you're accurate. We want our family trees to accurately reflect relationships. And so you have some choices there as far as parentage goes. And then you also have some choices as far as spousal or relationships or not. So just because 2 people have a child together does not mean that they are spouses, even though that's the default. You can change that. Okay, and then lastly, and I put this in italics because I want to just talk about it a little bit. It's not one of those hard and fast rules, but you decide how to apply it. I'll share with you how I have applied it. Don't include people in your tree that you're not related to. And here's why. I get messages, even though my tree is public, I get messages on a fairly regular basis from other Ancestry.com users who say, oh, I found this person in your tree and I have more information about them. Or I found this person in your tree, how are you related to them? Accurate as it can possibly be. So that is all I have prepared for you today. If you are watching this live, please feel free to stick around, and I will be logged into the chat online in just a few minutes to answer any additional questions you might have. If you're not watching this live, if you're watching an archived version of this on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment on our YouTube channel with the video. I do monitor those and will respond as necessary.